So my topic today is simulating solutions. We'll be talking about computer modeling and simulation. The methodology, as Postolo said, that I feel like once I discovered it and met it, I had been separated from it at birth. It's something I very much enjoy. As a philosopher, one has to be extremely clear in computer modeling, and if they're done well, they illuminate the mechanisms and the causes of very complex phenomena, like the refugee crisis. I'm going to go around in a clockwise circle here. Basically, a few comments of introduction, what we're up to, why modeling is important, our approach for this particular set of models, some of which you'll hear about in a few minutes, some challenges and opportunities that we've met during the last couple of years working on the project, and then what our next steps are. So first of all, lots of different voices come to the process of addressing issues related to complex issues like the refugee crisis. Policymakers and practitioners are concerned about policies. What do we do that works? They're on the ground, they're trying to solve the issues. We've heard several people who are in that position say, how can we fix this? What's the problems on the ground? Other people come to the problem as scholars, as theoreticians, asking questions that are more theoretical. How can we understand what's going on? Depending on discipline, psychology, how are people's anxieties about other groups, in-groups and out-groups, or cognitive science, what biases are at play that keep people from paying attention to and showing concern and empathy for others. Political science, what's going on with behind the scenes politically, economics, all these complex issues. So scholars who, of course, are concerned about the refugee crisis are also asking, how can we bring our expertise to bear? So the question that drives this project is, how could we put these kinds of concerns together around computer simulation and modeling? And I'll try to describe briefly how that works. What we did in May is brought together 17 scholars and computer modelers here to Lesbos at the Mytilene Center. The video you're about to see was made by our own Thomas Trask during that week. And so I want to show you this 2-minute video and then explain a bit more about what we're doing. So.
Starfish have washed up onto the beach and they're dying. And she walks on the beach and she picks up a starfish and starts throwing it back into the water. She keeps going. And this old man comes up to her and says, "Little girl, you can't save all these starfish." And she picks one up and she throws it in the water and she said, "Well, I saved that one." Carry me home, there's a sound down in the ground. Carry me home, don't you weep for right.
When you put 147,000 people through an island that's population is only 70,000, and you do that in a 30-day span of time, I mean, just imagine what that's got to be like.
The smuggler they took us to the basement.
It's not about the refugees, it's about all of us.
This is not Greece's problem. This is not Europe's problem. This is a world problem.
The island is a safe place to go for a holiday. People stay away.
The tourism just went away. Tourists didn't want to come to an island and see refugee boats coming across the water.
Because we lost our tourism, everyone's even scared to say the word refugee.
My goal is to help these refugees in the scientific way.
It's not just an algorithm, right? It's not simply a computer program that we run and try to quantify the human experience.
If we come up with good models that identify the mechanisms that cause conflict or that make the flow of peoples go more smoothly without leading to violence, if we really can discover that, it won't just help people, it will help these people. So that's what drew us here, and what exactly did we do, and what do we hope to do? First, why modeling? When people first hear about computer modeling and simulation, it can sound overwhelming, confusing, difficult, and it is. The programming takes a high level of skill. But what we've come up with is an approach that brings in people who don't need to know modeling, who bring their own expertise, their own experience, their own qualitative data or interests, and they work as teams together to build models and simulations. The reason why I get so excited about modeling, there are lots of reasons, which I could spend the whole presentation on. But let me just mention three. First, it's been called the third pillar of science. Theory is one classic pillar, experimentation, the second. In the last 20 or 30 years, computer modeling and simulation has grown so fast that it's been called the third pillar. In a sense, a computer model is a giant theory, a complex algorithm that puts together variables and argues this is how they're all related. But at the same time, it allows simulations so that you can experiment within an artificial society. You can play around and test what happens if you change how NGOs or how refugees are treated in different contexts. Secondly, if you think of statistics as a snapshot, you might have different variables like size of the NGO, experience of the NGO workers, where the refugees are from, age of the refugees. And statistics can put together a correlation of different variables and take a picture. At this point, you had this many refugees, this many NGOs, and these were some of the correlations between the factors that are at play. What a simulation allows you to do is create a movie, a video. So you have the same variables or even more, and you can play a story, a narrative that says, here's how these variables will continue interacting into the future. It takes a lot of calibration and validation to do that, but if it's done well, then you can actually change the movie right in the middle and say, okay, what happens if in 2016 we had done this instead of that? You can explore in the artificial society what kinds of policies would have had different effects. One of my favorite examples to try to illustrate modeling, maybe you've heard of World of Warcraft or SimCity, these kinds of simulation games. But most of you are on Facebook, I assume. You see sometimes these little games where you can play, you can simulate farming, for example. So imagine you have 30 gold coins, and you can either buy vegetable seeds or bricks or warriors to protect, guards to protect your farm. So you start and you just pick 10 gold coins for each. You plant your seeds and they start to grow. And you have a nice little barn and you start putting your vegetables in the barn. And then the barbarian hordes come and destroy your guards and everything, and you're dead, right? So then you just hit reset and start all over. And this time maybe you spend 12 gold coins on guards and see how things go. So now imagine a much more complex system where you have 30 million euro. And you're going to be bringing in 5,000 or 10,000 refugees from Middle Eastern countries into southern Norway. So then people say, okay, we should spend our money. Some people say we should spend it on language. Teach them the language so they can interact, get a job as quickly as possible. Others say, no, the most important thing is to spend the money to give them economic support directly so that their children feel safe, so that they feel comfortable and calm, and then they'll automatically integrate. Others say, no, we should spend the money trying to create programs where the young people can interact with each other, immigrants as well as host people. A host of other different kinds of policies, people arguing how to spend the 30 million. What you can't do, someone has to decide at some point, but what you can't do is try something, and then if there's radicalization or terrorism or unemployment, hit the reset button, right? You just can't do that. You can't say, okay, let's get rid of all these refugees and bring in a new group and see how this new program works, right? So the simulation, if it's put together well, can give you a sense of what would happen if you spend the money in different ways. So our approach is to bring together experts in whatever areas are relevant for the particular problem. And we have dozens of models and dozens of teams doing projects on different topics. This morning, we're focusing on the refugee and immigration models. We put together really bright people who are experts in their fields with some of the best computer modelers and simulation people in the world. And we put them in a room in Mataki, if we can get them there, so that they're isolated from the world and can focus and get to know each other, put together their knowledge, work together to come up with solutions. At the University of Agder, we have already, the university has given us 2 postdocs and 3 PhD students who are working, some of them on this particular project, as well as others. But we have other international partners for the modeling project we're describing this morning, the Center for Mind and Culture in Boston, and Virginia Modeling Analysis and Simulation Center in Virginia. And you'll hear from some of our colleagues from there soon. So the particular set of models that we'll be discussing has to do with modeling the migration of peoples. And the original vision here was not simply to focus on refugees, but to get a sense of the whole system, from events that lead people to be forced from their homes and leave and seek a new life or seek survival, to when they first arrive in a new country, the first generation integration. Also, the second generation has a very different set of dynamics. Typically, they know the language better. They may or may not have memories of their home country. And then long-term equilibrium. That is to say, in many places in Europe and elsewhere, you have generations of an ethno-religious group that have lived in the same basic area. So how then, in the long term, can you have an equilibrium between, for example, refugees in immigrants in Norway? The Pakistanis in Oslo, for example, have been there for generations. Similar situations in France and Germany and throughout Europe. So our question is, how can we use computer modeling and simulation to understand the movement of peoples in general? The models you'll be hearing about in a few minutes are the first 2. But just to mention briefly the third or the fourth one, this is the model for long-term equilibrium. The idea here is to use geographic information systems. This is a map of London with the actual data of immigrant status, all kinds of variables related to immigrants, policies in terms of access to education, to work, the degree to which people are open to immigrants in each of these areas. And then you can run simulations. Here's an example. If you have an economic crisis, and the majority the majority group gets less jobs and the minority group gets more jobs, how does that affect on your far right there? How does that affect suspicion or xenophobia, right? So you can change and explore the world based on real data and say, if there's an economic crisis of this kind and it's likely to lead to this kind of suspicion, what other parameters in the model can you change to lower the intolerance or the suspicion between the groups? You'll hear some more concrete examples in a few minutes. So the opportunities, in my view, for modeling and simulation, applying them to issues like the social challenges we've been discussing this week, are first and foremost to apply these tools to humanitarian concerns. For at least 2 or 3 decades, billion-dollar companies and the military have been using this technology. It requires a lot of computing power. It has required a lot of money. And so sales, marketing, industry, military, soldiers, paths for provisions, this has been modeled and simulated for years. Only recently, I would say in the last 10 years or so, has it moved into social science. So now modeling and simulating dynamics related to opinion shifts, why people with certain ideologies become socially polarized, and various other social phenomena. But only extremely recently has it been applied to humanitarian issues. In part, this is because now we have more computing power. But another reason is you have universities like the University of Agder who aren't interested primarily in making money, but in leading to new knowledge, co-creating knowledge, and then put their resources into putting this kind of team together. So this is one of the main reasons I get so excited about the process. It works, and this is why these huge companies and governments use it. Now, finally, it's a tool that we can apply in these kinds of issues. Computer technologies provide an analytic and predictive power that we've never known before. The number of variables that can be included, far beyond statistical models or qualitative analysis or what the human mind can wrap itself around. And predictive as well, not prediction in the sense of a crystal ball and you know exactly what's going to happen in the future, but in a scientific sense, understanding the causal mechanisms, the conditions under which it's highly probable that a particular phenomenon will occur. So if one carefully creates agent architecture, simulated minds, what we use primarily is multi-agent artificial intelligence, the agents are sufficiently sophisticated and nuanced that the variables that are key to leading them to interact with other people in their in-group and their out-group, those are adequately modeled. If the simulation can lead to, without being programmed, the emergence of macro phenomena like violence, like other sorts of crises related to not enough food, not enough heat, so forth, then you have a plausible argument that you've gotten a grip on the mechanisms that are causing the problem, because you can create it in the simulation. Then you can go back and say, what if we change this? What if we change that? What if we add a new actor in this particular simulation and run it through using the supercomputing systems, run different variations to see what might happen? And third, when you have complex problems like the refugee crisis, you need dialogues. You need lots of people coming together with the relevant expertise, listening to each other, contributing to models that are quite complex, but then can be specified by computer programmers so that they make extremely clear exactly what the assumptions are, exactly what the goals of the simulation are. So those are the opportunities, and we're excited to be moving toward them. But of course, there are challenges. A challenge almost everyone faces is funding. This takes money, takes time, takes hours of work. We've been very lucky so far. We have about over $5 million US so far in grants, and we're pursuing more. But if we're not able to continue securing funds, then of course we won't be able to continue the process. So that's the first big challenge. The second challenge, and the one that surprised me the most, is the difficulty in bringing policymakers on board. I think there could be lots of reasons for this. One is it's a relatively new tool, extremely complex, and can sound frightening, computer modeling. So we've been working hard at how to bring policymakers into the discussion, and we've taken trips to Oslo and talked to NAV, for example, the social services in Norway, and lots of other policymakers have been part of models, but we haven't been able to bring in as many as early as we'd like to, and so this is a big challenge. There's the policymakers happily holding hands. We hope that's the goal, right? So what are the next steps in order to solve those two challenges? The first is to continue applying for grants, both for PhD students and postdocs at the university, but also nationally, internationally, philanthropic organizations. We also want to reach out to corporations who might be interested, who already have the expertise in many cases of computer simulation, and might be interested in helping us take this powerful tool and apply it to humanitarian concerns. And then we also are trying to establish connections with policymakers by sponsoring, or not sponsoring, but encouraging and participating in the Lesbos dialogues, but also networking, trying to strengthen research centers at the Agder Research Center, as well as the University of Agder. Our new strategy at the university is co-creation, and I can think of very few methodologies that so directly and obviously involve co-creation. You have policymakers, you have theoreticians, you have all the stakeholders, ideally the stakeholders involved in the creation of the model, and creating new knowledge about the phenomena. So this is what we've been trying to do. I wanted to stay under my 20 minutes, so we're now going to hear from a couple of few other examples of computer modeling and simulation. Thank you.